We map these lands, but they are not ours. The author and publisher of Detroit in 50 Maps acknowledges the history of the Wauwiatong Nong, what is now called Detroit, Michigan, and wish to honor the indigenous people who continue to steward this land. So up next, Authentically Detroit sits down with anthropologist, cartographer, and information designer Alex B. Hill. Donna and I will learn more about the Detroit voting map as well as his book, Detroit in 50 Maps. But first, this week's hot take. Detroit officers fired 38 shots at a 20-year-old black man experiencing a mental health crisis. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts in a minute. Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that asks the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit. By Detroiters, for Detroiters. Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the Neighborhood Tech Hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecn-detroit.org. Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the WDET studios. We are a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcast from. And it's time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. This week, Donna and I have Alex B. Hill joining us. Alex, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. I think this is the best show in the whole city.
Are you serious?
Totally serious.
Wow. Well, it's an honor to have you on. We've been wanting to have you on to talk about Detroit in 50 Maps. Y'all, I'm holding his book. If you haven't gotten it, you need to go and get it. I got it signed today. So I know Alex. We're friendly in email and we're friendly on the socials, but I finally met him today in 3D. So it's really cool to meet you, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
Donna, how's this day finding you?
Well, happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
That's right.
You know, listen, sometimes you got to rename things in order to bring some clarity and significance to that. I didn't think we had this day out and off. You know, I remember that, right? Because I'm actually CEO of the organization, but one of the staff said we're off on Monday. And I was like, we're not off on Columbus Day. And I was thinking that we had, historically been off on Columbus Day or whatever they call it. And it was really offensive to me that we would celebrate that as a holiday. But then I remembered that we celebrated Indigenous People Day, and I'm really happy to do that. I'm actually happy to start a show with the opening you just gave on Indigenous People Day and to be talking about the maps of Detroit and giving some historical context. So I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I am excited because I woke up feeling, number one, rested, but I woke up in a clean house. And let me tell you, my house had not been deeply cleaned for, it's actually an embarrassment if I go ahead and tell you how long it has been since I had the opportunity to deeply clean. I've been like running, nonstop. But this past weekend, I chose myself. I chose my home. And it felt really good. And to wake up in a clean house is unmatched. It's unmatched. So I'm feeling good. The sun is out. It was a beautiful fall day. The trees are treeing like no other. And I love it. I love it.
So now I have to come over now that it's been deeply cleaned before you tell
Donna,
me.
you have an
This
open
is a
invitation.
bad time, especially because my house has not been deeply cleaned. So I need to see what that feels like.
Yeah,
I've been a little busy too.
Get inspired.
And we had the Right Gala on Saturday and everything that entailed.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I got about 3/4 there. I started. What about you, Alex?
I can't say my house is clean. I've got 2 kids under 4.
And one on the way.
That's right.
And y'all have been busy. Wow.
Congratulations on the way.
Alex.
We're trying to pump out some home improvement projects. So we have some extra space that's
Oh,
ready.
man. I love it. Congratulations.
So when
Thanks.
is the one on the way due?
End of January.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
soon.
Very soon.
Oh, my God. Y'all are brave.
Yeah.
Y'all are brave. I've always said one and done. If that.
You know what? I just can't wait to see Papa Orlando. He loves kids.
I love the
I
babies.
remember when I brought Luna up
She
to
loved
work
me
one day,
immediately.
and she just
That
smiled
baby
for him. She
loved
wasn't
me.
smiling at anybody. She was like, "Hey," and put her arms out.
loved
I don't know
me.
if that means she's a good judge of character or she was too young to understand what was happening.
Good judge of character. I'm going to err on that side. Listen, y'all, we got something pretty serious for hot takes. Detroit officers fired 38 shots at a 20-year-old black man experiencing a mental health crisis, police say. So it's a 20-year-old black man here in the city of Detroit. He was killed after 5 Detroit police officers fired 38 shots at him in roughly 3 seconds. I think there were about 15 wounds. His name is Porter Burks, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was experiencing a psychotic break when his brother called police and told officers who responded to the call that he was concerned for Burks and the safety of the community. And so one of the responding officers was also on the crisis intervention team. So that person had been trained for something like this to help de-escalate these kind of mental health crises.
48 hours of training makes everybody an expert.
It makes So the officers, let me say this. Burks' brother told the officers when they arrived at the scene that Burks was experiencing a mental health crisis and was armed with a knife. And had slashed the tires on his brother's car. Burks repeatedly refused to put down the knife and charged at one of the officers without warning. The officer, and this is quote, the officer fearing his safety and the other officers fearing for their partner's safety fired their weapons. This is from the chief of police, Chief White. Despite this horrific act, the officers were able to quickly transition to first aid mode and begin to render first aid. The police handcuffed Burks' dead body before taking him to the hospital. The 5 officers are now on administrative leave pending the outcome of a state investigation. This is just a sad story all around. Donna, what say you?
I mean, the pox on the police who shot him and put that many bullets into him, over 20 bullets, and then handcuffed his corpse. If only they had realized he was human. If only they understood that this was somebody who was loved and cared for, who had a disease like so many people do, but whose life had value. But instead, they saw a black man with a mental illness, and he had to go. Now, we're not going to see pictures of him dressed up in little sailor suits in his bedroom with teddy bears like we do when white people go out and kill black people. And the police bring them in safely, even though they are armed with automatic weapons or whatever. The police know how to de-escalate white people. With a black man, you got to put him down. Kind of like you do a pit bull dog. You got to put him down because he poses a danger. You got to, whatever. And I think a lot of this stems from a lot of the racist beliefs that people have about black men not feeling pain, beliefs people have about black men somehow having superhuman strength, that you have to use excessive force because otherwise your life is in danger. So I think it's problematic in that sense and very sad. And equally sad, his family had to call the police when he was having a mental breakdown. And this was not his first psychotic break. The news reports several incidents of psychotic breaks, but we don't have a system in place to help provide care and treatment for mentally ill people. Today, when I was on my way here, I got a call from somebody who you probably know, Orlando, who was reaching out on behalf of a friend who's a clinical social worker who's working with a 20-year-old who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He's a nice guy. He's a good person. But he did some things and he went too far. And the question is, what do we do for people who have these illnesses?
The answer is not kill them.
Well,
I think, you know.
But it is. Go on, I'm sorry.
No, I just think that, you know, this thing, reading this and hearing about it, it sent chills through my body. And I am, I don't know how people perceive me. Sometimes they think they perceive the opposite, but I am a friend to the police here in the city of Detroit. I've worked closely with the Detroit Police Department as a member of the 5th Precinct Community Relations Council. My brother is a police officer. That does not stop me or makes me withhold my critique of the Detroit Police Department or its chief. And you have 5 officers on this scene and one of him with a knife, right? We couldn't figure out any other way to de-escalate him charging at one of the officers, but to fire 38 shots in 3 seconds and to hit him. He was actually hit and wounded with 15 wounds on his body. Right. I think this is more than just de-escalation or stopping a threat. This was execution in my book. And I feel like nobody is saying that. The jury is still out on whether Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy will pursue charges of these 5 officers. The officers' identity is protected. Chief White, in his press conference, vouched essentially in so many words for the actions of these officers. But I think Detroiters, I think Black people know in their body, there's something that goes on in our bodies when we see this, when we hear about this. We have a response, an emotional and a traumatic one. And when our body feels it before we can put words to it, there's something off about this entire story. And I cannot wait for more details to come off. But, 48 hours of training, like Donna said, is nowhere near enough. The answer, once again, is not to kill folks with these mental illnesses.
But it's also not to call the police.
That too.
And families don't have options. And that's what I was getting at, is that people live in fear of sometimes their loved ones who have these breaks and in fear for them. And there's not good options for what do we do to intervene to protect their lives while also protecting ourselves.
Facts.
Our society has pretty much abandoned people who have mental health issues. You're absolutely right. And I'm reading this book, My Grandma's Hands. Have you read that?
No.
Oh, the author of the book talks about how trauma is experienced in our bodies, and then goes on, and there's a lot of information in there about policing and the way police officers are traumatized by their experiences, their lived experiences as officers, and also bring their traumatic histories and their racial biases to the table. And it's not just white police officers who have a racial bias.
Absolutely.
All people have a racial bias against Black people, people of all races. You have to decolonize your mind. You have to retrain your thinking to not see things that we're programmed to believe in our society. And so that 48 hours of training, she talks about it in this book, or rather, I think it's written by a woman. She talks about the fact that you have this lizard brain, and the lizard brain reacts before you have a chance to think. And if the lizard brain has been programmed to believe there's a threat, that lizard brain is going to shoot. We need to do something to reprogram lizard brains, and she has outlined a number of steps and things. It's really exciting to me because our director of the Stoudemire Wellness Hub, Naomi Cawthorn, told me about the book, so of course I had to buy it because I'm an impulsive book buyer. But it's really got some good messages in there, and I can't wait to finish reading it and perhaps bring somebody in to describe some alternatives to this. But I don't think police training helps. I also think that, why do you have 5 police officers there in the first place when there's one man with a gun? That was an excessive response.
With a knife.
With a knife. That's an excessive response. So I also think that you have to look at how policing is looked at in our community.
I don't know the specifics around like why they would dispatch so so many officers. But the other
if you
thing
were
that,
schizophrenic and you were having some mental health problems, and 5 people with guns were surrounding you,
Right.
Yeah.
would that de-escalate?
That wouldn't
your
de-escalate.
crisis?
But one of the things, one of the details of the story also is that the brother called the police because he felt like he was in danger and the community was in danger. So I don't know what the rationale is around how many officers gets dispatched for something like this. But the other point that I want to make is, every time something like this happens, we hear about the officers being scared and fearing for their safety. I mean, like, why are we? If you scared, right? I think there's a threshold, right, where we need to qualify fear and being scared and timid as a police officer, especially when you got 4 other officers on the scene and this man only has a knife.
But the thing is, the brother called. The brother was obviously frantic, right?
Yeah.
You might need to de-escalate that situation. His fear. He's at a frightened state and he says something. I do believe that if there was good police training, you would not have 5 armed people approaching somebody who is obviously having some mental health challenges holding a knife, because it would feel very threatening. His lizard brain kicks in. He's going to feel like, wait a minute, it's me against 5 people. He's watched television news possibly and knows that there's an issue with police and black bodies. And so I do want to hold the police department accountable for making good decisions when there are crisis situations in the community. Even if 5 people showed, all 5 people did not have to be there in shooting range. And that's all I'm saying. I think that that one police officer who's been trained to de-escalate could possibly talk to him. And you've seen the hostage shows, and I know I've seen it only on TV, where you have the one negotiator who's talking and only one person is doing this, and everybody sort of stands back and lets that happen. And that's done for a reason. So I'm hopeful that, I'm hoping, not necessarily hopeful, but hoping that there is some work done to improve the response time and also other numbers for families to call when there's a mental health threat.
Right.
22 years old, Porter Burks. Our hearts go out to this family. And now we're just sort of in this waiting game. Kim Worthy, sometimes you can't really predict what Kim Worthy will do. It's always a toss-up because she's not afraid to take on the police. I think her and Chief Craig had a really tumultuous relationship. But, we'll see what happens. I don't want to, speculate around what she would do, but I'm really anxious to see what her findings will be. Listen, y'all, that's going to do it for Hot Takes. If you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to help make that dream a reality. Located inside the Sotomayor, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344. Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that asks the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters. This week we have a very special guest with us. As the election approaches, we thought it would be cool to talk to anthropologist, cartographer, and information designer Alex B. Hill about the Detroit voting map. Alex has over 15 years of experience working with nonprofit organizations on campaigns that impact policies and communities. The Detroit voting map, released after the primary elections, helps us understand who's voting in the city. Alex, welcome.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
It's been a long time coming.
It has.
So you said something to us before the show started about your love to just talk about Detroit neighborhoods. Why do you love Detroit neighborhoods so much?
I think because they're so controversial.
In what way?
I mean, it's hard to define. Are we a city of neighborhoods? What constitutes a neighborhood, and who gets to define it? I think that's the kind of biggest question. And for me, it's, I'd love to see more communities actually defining their own neighborhoods.
You want to know what's interesting? Growing up in this city, the only neighborhoods that I knew had a name were Indian Village, Palmer Woods, Sherwood Forest. You know what I mean?
Right. Those ones that got historic designation.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so the neighborhoods that I lived in, I didn't know that they had names. And all of a sudden, it feels like, in the 2010s, neighborhood names begin to pop up all over the place. Who was facilitating that?
It's been longer than the 2010s, though. It's been going on for some time. I remember United Way used to have the neighborhood maps before the city did, and we wanted to sign the sub-communities and all of this. But when you talk to most residents, I might agree with Orlando. Most residents,
I live on the east side.
I live on the east side. Now, if you live. Or I live in Northwest Detroit, or I live in Southwest Detroit. But there's not a whole lot of, neighborhood identification that doesn't spill over. So I think that usually when neighborhoods have names, you're sort of creating this island of privilege inside of whatever it is happening there. So all of the more privileged neighborhoods always had a name. Boston Edison, you knew where that was. East English Village had a name. Grandmont Rosedale had a name. But most of the places that people lived, they were either not familiar with the names or it didn't matter. Like I lived on Pennington, right? And I found out that was a Bagley community. I went to Bagley Elementary School. I didn't think I lived in the Bagley community. I just knew I went to Bagley Elementary School and I lived on Pennington and had friends up and down the street. But I think that, when you define neighborhoods, I think there is also this territorial thing where you're deciding what kind of resources you're going to place inside of those neighborhoods, how you're going to protect those neighborhoods. And usually when neighborhoods have a name, they really function to sort of defend those boundaries, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, those sub-communities that United Way continued, those go even back to the city's master planning efforts,
right?
When they were identifying which neighborhoods were declining or which ones had housing stock that needed to get, rehabbed and all that. Yeah. So, it was very planning heavy, less people heavy.
Yeah. You had the Near East Side. Is Near East Side on one of these maps right here?
That was Morningside.
The Near East Side is largely where the Chrysler Freeway is after Black Bottom. That's the Near East Side.
Oh, wow. See?
I have books on the Near East Side that Near East Siders wrote about their experiences. And you do have the North End, and people in the North End know what the North End is. So you have a mix. But what ends up happening is, it seems to me, because everybody knew what the Cass Corridor was too, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, I knew what the Cass Corridor was. And when I got home from school, folks were talking about, we're going to hang out in Midtown. We're going to Midtown. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, where is that? They're like, over there by, Wayne State on Cass. I'm like, are you talking about the Cass Corridor? Like, it changed that quickly.
You had a white woman in Sue Mosey moving in and declaring herself mayor of Midtown. I don't know if she declared it or somebody else did. But the mayor of Midtown began to amass all of this land and come up with ways to really, as a planned gentrification. And she worked with Irving Reed, who was the president of Wayne State University, and he was more of a real estate developer than he was an educator, because he developed a lot of real estate, including the real estate that we're on right now. And I appreciate this. Thank you, Irving, for what you did. But the net impact of it is really amazing, because I see lofts being built or apartments being built right here around the Cass Corridor that are selling for $800,000. And it's crazy to me that in the former Cass Corridor, that's what's happening. My sister, one of her first jobs, my older sister, one of her first jobs was at Harbor Light, which was on Cass Avenue. And Harbor Light is now a community development organization. I think it's Cass Corridor Neighborhood Development Corporation. But it used to treat veterans. It used to treat substance abuse, people who had substance abuse, and people with schizophrenia, right? And she was a social worker there. And they're no longer welcome in this community. COTS used to be here. Remember COTS?
Right, yeah. And there was the Veterans Center,
and
too.
The Veterans Center, that's right.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
And so as this became gentrified, you can't put homeless veterans around $800,000 units. No, you got to move them. And so COTS moved into a new location, bless them, and we're making way for...
And NSO was over here. Neighborhood Service Organization.
Neighborhood Service had the Tumani Center, and that was a mess. But, you know, I don't know if you ever drove by there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were the last holdout for...
Yeah.
I had done a map, too, of social services in Midtown, and how many of them had just been kind of forced out or migrated to different locations in the city.
I got a question for you. How did you get into this? I mean, what? Because, you know, we all, Donna... I think Donna and I may be a little atypical. We like to nerd out about a bunch of different things. And so we can nerd out on maps and like be there with you. But a lot of folks are just not into it. How did this happen? How did this come up for you?
I don't really know. I have to go back to being a Boy Scout.
Okay.
To getting
Take
really
us back. Yeah.
kind of hooked on maps and, you know, using a compass and all that stuff. But then for Detroit, you know, I didn't really start making maps until I moved to Detroit. Because that was kind of my entry point to understanding. I grew up in a white flight suburb of Flint, Grand Blanc, and so you know my experience in Detroit was you drive down for
a game at
entertainment,
Tigers, a concert,
Tiger Stadium. You drive down to for like my family loves dogs, so we went to Cobo for the dog show.
When did you go to Flint? What did you go to Flint for?
Well, I had family in Flint, so my grandparents and aunts and uncles and everyone was still in Flint. And then I also went to high school at a private Catholic school on the north end of Flint.
Wow, that's funny.
Which is funny that...
what school?
Powers Catholic.
Oh. Wow, okay. Yeah. I want to read your words back to you and have you respond.
Sure.
Right? You said this: I launched Detroitography in 2013 to emphasize the unique way that people within the city think about space and place, their own idiosyncratic demographics and pathways and memories. My goal was to offer an array of insights as to the exact location of Detroit embedded within history, but that would also be transformative, related to dominant narratives of the city. Say more.
Yeah, well, and I have to start with my entry point being in Detroit. I was a community health worker, and I wouldn't necessarily. I tell people this. I wouldn't necessarily have hired myself as a community health worker.
Who did you work for?
At Wayne State for a project there. And so my entry point for Detroit was, acting as a counselor and sitting in people's living rooms and dining rooms and, talking with real Detroiters in their neighborhoods, in their homes, and getting to see, just the full condition of Detroit, the beautiful and the not so beautiful. But that's not necessarily the primary entry point for college age white men in the city of Detroit. And I think from that, that really gave me the base for my understanding of Detroit, and then the questions that I had about Detroit. And most of those questions were, why is this the way it is?
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that on the east side of Detroit, you say in here that neighborhoods that had identities, have strong neighborhood identities, also received, even from this map, we can see neighborhoods that are obviously recognizable. This neighborhood also highlights the areas of Detroit that don't have strong neighborhood identities. hopefully, more community engagement will help neighborhoods and communities develop their own sense of identity and naming as Detroit welcomes new investments and new residents. So in the Lower East Side, or in Southeast Detroit, I think we're now calling it, there was this one area where a former board member of my organization said, why is nothing happening here? And so we decided we were going to pull all the people together, and we created this boundary that looks sort of like a house. And she called me up one day and she said, I've got a name for it. And I said, what? She said, Good Stock. And now, so we call it Good Stock. We've got T-shirts with Good Stock on, and we have paraphernalia. There's a Good Stock Association, and it's really, really coming together. So now you have city officials talking about the Good Stock neighborhood.
I did.
Orlando was overseeing the work of organizing Good Stock. And, so it kind of speaks to what you're saying here, where people are coming together and saying, you know what, we want our piece. Let's call ourselves something.
I love that, Donna.
But this is such a beautiful story of residents creating their own map, and it's a really cool map. I'm going to have to get you the map. So in the next edition, you can put Good Stock.
Yeah, it looks like a house. Yes. I want to ask you this question as a follow-up to what you said. You said, from your time as a community health worker and going around and talking to residents, talking to Black and brown people mostly as this white college-age guy, you said it gave you your baseline understanding of Detroit. What is that understanding?
It's broad and it's diverse. I think that was probably the best way to start thinking about Detroit, not just, those singular narratives that you hear either parroted by the media or in the popular books about Detroit. There's thousands of stories, and people don't always think about that. Or you also don't think about the stories that are, I'll say most of the folks that I got to work with were, so it was parents and teenagers that were part of the program, but then a lot of times, it was grandparents who were the caregivers for the kids too. So, and then thinking about, all the stories that are going to be lost in Detroit because no one's really kind of collecting those and engaging with those. And that's why I also, I don't talk about Detroit as just the boundary line that outlines the city, although I will talk about that a lot and how people don't really know where the boundary lines are and they can't draw it. But it's also, it's those memories, it's those feelings. And like I did a mapping workshop one time with students at the Boggs Center. And I had the outline of Detroit, and the girl came up to me, she said, "That's not Detroit. That's not where I live." And I thought that was, it was amazing. It was not her experience. She was not a planner looking at the outline of the city. She had a sense of what her neighborhood was and where her grandma lived and where they went grocery shopping. And that was Detroit.
So Orlando, that resonates with you, what he just said, right?
Sure does. It does. It does. And part of the reason why it resonates, like in the book, you talk about, transformation related to the dominant narrative. And it's interesting that as a book of maps, like you are correlating, mapping a city with narratives and storytelling. How can maps tell stories?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, it's thinking about those pathways and those experiences that people have in places, because it's not just the physical place. It's also how that place makes you feel. So I think the obvious one for a lot of folks in Detroit is thinking about safety, where they feel safe, where they don't feel safe. But then it's also joy, where they have the choir practice at church that just, that they love going to that, or, the meals that they share at these different banquet halls or families' houses. And it's not just one place. It's all of these kind of myriad pathways that people find and take in the city that defines their city.
So has any place changed in the city more than Corktown in recent years?
Besides Midtown and Downtown, because they got all the money, I don't know. Corktown is definitely a whole different spot.
Corktown, I'm looking at your maps on Corktown.
Yeah.
And the physical maps have really shifted.
Right, yeah.
And then the population seems to have shifted, and the price points have skyrocketed.
Right.
In a neighborhood that does not necessarily have obvious charms to people just driving through, other than proximity to Soul's Barbecue, and the old Tiger Stadium, I guess now, Detroit Pale. But it's hard for me to understand that at the same time, so many old-time Corktown residents have been pushed out, right?
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of them, from what I'm hearing from some people, were Mexican.
Yeah, right. That was
It's right near Southwest.
a lot of the early Mexican Americans in Detroit were in Corktown, and they actually, for the most part, had to lie about their heritage. A lot of them would say that they were Spanish or Spaniards, so that they could buy houses in Corktown, because otherwise they weren't going to get a home. But that's kind of why there is that. Immigrant populations generally kind of land in the same neighborhoods and grow from there. And so that's why we have Mexican Town and kind of that heritage that has remained so close to Corktown.
Yeah, but what has happened to their stories, When you talk about the stories and the pathways to joy,
right. Yeah.
what happens to the stories of people who have literally been pushed out?
Right. Yeah. Right. Because those aren't the stories of Corktown that you hear about. It's Detroit's oldest neighborhood, and it's all, from County Cork and the Irish, and you don't get all of the kind of, it was Mexican Americans, it was Syrian Americans, there's such a diverse group of folks that were there.
It's really interesting to me that we're having this conversation with you on Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's a perfect fit, really, when we talk about the colonialization of the city of Detroit, and its morphosis into a predominantly black city in the second half of the 20th century. And what really comes front of mind for me is, number one, the suburbanization of Detroit, but the borders, what you describe in your book, the borders of Detroit. And we're bordering so many, suburbs. Talk about why that was important for you to highlight.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of because also Detroit is this concept, right, that goes beyond the city's borders. There's all of these people who left Detroit for various reasons. That would be a whole other show. But I think those borders and the way they were drawn really have kind of situated Detroit in its region, and for the regional trouble that we still have. A lot of the small suburbs that are all around the edges of Detroit, they exist because they got together and said, we don't want to be annexed by Detroit. But then those same towns then became sundown towns where black people were not welcome, and they've remained, and they've kind of kept those really strong barrier lines. Yeah. I think the best example is Grosse Pointe Park. They keep trying to actually build a barrier between the city and their. I don't know if they're a city. Are they a village? Whatever.
City.
Grosse Pointe Park.
It's a city.
It's a city.
Yeah. So
with a mayor.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think it's important to understand, though, if you're my age and, we're close, and you grew up in Detroit in the 1970s when Coleman Young became mayor. I went to Mercy High School, which is in Farmington Hills, and most of my classmates who were white and lived in the suburbs said, I've never come to Detroit. I've never been to Detroit. That's why I asked you about your relationship with Flint, because what I found is they didn't come to Detroit ever. And so it kind of boggles the mind where some of them are my Facebook friends now, and, bygones let bygones be bygones, but they're all repping Detroit now. It's cool to rep Detroit. And as a Detroiter who watched the racial injustice, the economic injustice play out, it's kind of hard to say, and now they're coming into Detroit and it's like our city. And, I think a lot of legacy black Detroiters are kind of like, wait a minute. I'm not saying we have to be first among equals, but I am saying that there should be as much effort and intention to keep our neighborhoods intact. And the same thing with Mexican Detroiters. So I have Mexican friends whose parents have been here, families have been here as long as mine, since 1919.
Who are not immigrants.
And
They've
immigrants,
been here.
they might be swept up by ICE because of how they look. But there's a claim we have to a city where we built things when other people turned off the lights and left. And in more and more neighborhoods, I think people are even arguing whether gentrification is happening here.
Right.
And I don't even understand how anybody can credibly have that argument. But,
Right. Well,
that is not happening.
No, there are people who say, it was on Facebook a couple weeks ago, somebody was quoting Alan Malek in his book, Divided City, where he says, there's no gentrification. And, sometimes that's the problem with statisticians and data people who sit and look at things from a mile away. You were door to door. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, let's hold that thought. We're going to ask him about that when we come back, and we're also going to ask him about the voting maps that you created after the primaries. More with Alex B. Hill after this quick break. Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that asks the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit. By Detroiters, for Detroiters. Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecn-detroit.org. Welcome back to Authentically Detroit. We are here with Alex B. Hill, and we are having a fascinating conversation about Detroit, maps, storytelling, gentrification. Donna and Alex, you guys were getting ready to make a point about how neighborhoods change.
Right. Well, I was just pointing out that you have some researchers who stand back and say gentrification isn't happening here. But you, having been a community health worker, going door to door and really looking at the neighborhood from a much more granular point of view, tell me what you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I've on my blog I've written about this, and it's gentrification isn't just data. There's a whole lot more that goes into it. And sure, if you just look at the data and if you just look at the sanitized G word, maybe it's not really happening like it's happening in other cities, because Detroit isn't like any other city. And if you want to talk about gentrification, you have to go back and just look at the mass disinvestment in neighborhoods and the people of Detroit. So
we need an applause button for that.
I think another thing to think about is, and this also kind of goes with the neighborhoods conversation. Wayne State University sits on an urban renewal site. Like, we are the site of where people essentially, colonized land to take it. Mathai Playfield, the only reason it's being mass developed now is because Wayne State claimed it back in the 50s and 60s when urban renewal is happening. So you have that. That's just an example of one program in Detroit, but that's happened kind of consecutively over and over.
What else is looked at? You said it's not just the data. What else is it, though?
I mean, it's more broadly, you really got to look at kind of policy that gets implemented. And I think policy is where you see gentrification really playing out.
And culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Culture, right?
What I see is neighborhood after neighborhood becoming more expensive than the people who grew up in the neighborhood can afford to live in. Mm-hmm. And I see that
because I can't go back to EEV if I wanted to.
I was like, we were on a tour of the East Side, and somebody said, "What are the housing values?" And somebody probably said, "Well, it's about $300,000." And I said, "That sounds good, unless you used to live there and you can't afford a $300,000 home." Mm-hmm. That's the problem with gentrification, is so many people are pushed out of places that they used to claim as their own, where they had that joy. Some of the businesses and institutions that used to exist aren't there, and some of them are replaced by establishments that don't really cater to the taste of longtime Detroiters.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other data that folks don't always look to is where those investment dollars are going. And you can see, I think we're going to talk about the voting map too, but those areas of investment are the ones where people are more comfortable. They're able to go and vote. They have the the disposable income to throw some extra into their home, or they're not living in that kind of precarious position that a lot of Detroiters are.
One day we'll talk about the role of murals in helping to facilitate displacement. This art that was revolutionary, radical art that has now been appropriated by people who are trying to create cool urban feel. When I see murals going up, I know something else is about to happen. Maybe not, but I see some correlation. Do you see that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the markers of kind of neighborhood change too, because they'll paint the new name on the wall.
It's that and the white woman walking her dog in the hood. It's like, oh, this is, because if we're honest, and I don't even know if the data says this, but Andre Perry says this, that, the mere presence of white people engineers market movement just by showing up, which is fascinating to me. I want to switch gears a little bit because a lot of folks may be thinking about the upcoming midterm elections that are coming up. I have my absentee ballot at home. I'm going to fill it out because typically I'm zigzagging the city on election day interviewing folks. During the primaries, you noticed that there was a trend of people reporting on voter turnout that wasn't accurate. First off, tell me what you saw, and then tell us what you created.
Yeah, well, so I saw a lot of folks kind of going through and highlighting the precinct that had the highest voter turnout. But I had also pulled the data from the Wayne County clerk. And if you combined the absentee voting with the in-person voting, it was actually a different part of the city where more people showed up to vote. And that was, Palmer Woods versus Grandmont Rosedale.
Yeah. And,
which isn't surprising, but go ahead.
No, I was saying, I used to live in both. I grew up and as a child, lived in Palmer Woods, and as a young mother, I lived in Grandmont Rosedale, and I can tell you the difference. Grandmont Rosedale is a well-organized community. It's very cohesive, and people act with common purpose there. It is, if anybody had to put together a storybook neighborhood, they would have a park in the middle, a community house, and kids playing soccer there. That's different. At one point, almost every nonprofit executive in Detroit lived in Grandmont Rosedale, and so they brought that whole nonprofit vibe with them. Whereas Palmer Woods is more singular, more individualistic, and so people don't have the same, I don't think, activism or same pride and connection to the city in Palmer Woods as they do in Grandmont Rosedale. I just found that the culture and the climate was completely different.
Right.
Now, it's been years since I lived in either place, so I could be wrong, but that's just my memory. And even when I talk to people in both places now, it seems like things are similar. Where did you see the least voter turnout? What was lacking?
It was wide swaths of the city where voter turnout was really low. And that's nothing
talking
new.
About an overall turnout of about 15%, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So, the mayor, every time he's been elected, has been with less than 21% of registered voters who even show up.
Yeah,
because 500,000 people are eligible to vote in the city of Detroit.
Right? Well, and that's not true either, is it? Because if Detroit has 640,000 people, 500,000 of them can't be a voting age, I don't think. I think that the other aspect of it is that, the declines in the registered voters lags because of the laws that don't allow you to take people off the voter rolls and that kind of thing, and maybe even a little bit of the clerk's negligence. I don't know, but I don't. I'm not here to talk about the clerk, but
we can talk about the clerk if we need to talk about the clerk.
But one thing I was really looking at and interested in, and I don't know if you can talk to this, is the areas where Sri Thanadar did the best. I was trying to see where they were, and I noticed that the areas that ECN is in, he did not do as well as he did in some other areas. Did you notice a pattern to that?
I can't say that I totally remember the areas where he did best.
Okay.
But I know a lot of folks, and maybe it was actually Orlando, commenting on social media about the guy was everywhere.
Yeah,
he was line dancing with people here, and he was eating barbecue over there, and stopping in at church over here. So, the guy has a lot of money, and he had a lot of time.
No doubt. But I also found that areas where you had more neighborhood organization and more informed and engaged people, you didn't see the same trends as you did where he was everywhere, because he was sometimes walking into a void of other kind of community organizing.
He also did really
activity.
well downriver, not including some of the Detroit neighborhoods. And, it's really interesting, number one, to see the trends in how people vote by neighborhood, right? And depending upon like who has access to those really, really hard to reach populations.
Right.
Because I guarantee you the reason why there are swaths and swaths of the city that had no voter turnout are also swaths and swaths where those folks are really hard to reach. My question is, can you add some narrative around why a Grant Mart Rosedale and a Palmer Woods would have the highest turnout? What's different there?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is what Donna noted, is that kind of civic pride, the community organization, and that doesn't exist everywhere.
Income,
that level,
middle income. Money, college attainment.
Don't the politicians also work to advance the interests of people who live in communities like that?
That vote?
Seems like a whole lot of people do not
think,
feel as though politicians are campaigning on their priorities. And if you're not campaigning on my priorities, I'm not going to show up. I mean, if they were...
Or answering my questions.
Answering my questions. I think that's part of what's broken about democracy right now, is the purchasing of politics, the fact that...
That's a book title, by the way. Purchasing of politics. We need to coin that. Please continue.
All right.
Copyright.
But this idea that, so we have so many people who have needs. I mean, we did a forum, right, Orlando? We did a 13th Congressional District forum, and I asked a question about homelessness. And almost every candidate responded the same. They talked about mental health. As though homelessness was a consequence of untreated mental health. And we already talked about the need for more mental health treatment.
Right.
But earlier in the forum, we had talked about housing prices and gentrification, and people aren't connecting the dots with actual proposals and policies that are going to put people in homes. There's this idea that if everybody, even though you may know the housing is really expensive, you're still thinking they're probably mentally ill. Now, mind you, people being mentally ill and homeless is not cool. I've got a staff person who told me last week that he had been mentally ill and living on the streets for 20 years, 25 years, and he was a Marine, and came back and lived on the streets. And God bless America. He is working for us, got a home, doing extremely well, a wonderful person. But, and I really want to have him on here one time so he can tell his story. Yeah. But the idea that you have throwaway people, and it's okay, is one thing. The other aspect of it is that we're not looking at the structural forces that keep people out of their homes. And if I'm a voter and you're not talking about my basic needs of housing, if you're not talking about tax foreclosures, if you're not talking about water shutoffs and repairing some of those harms right now, I may not feel motivated to vote.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like mental health is the new thoughts and prayers. Like, you can't just throw that out as a blanket for everything.
Zingers. Zingers.
Alex is bringing it today, isn't he?
Listen, I want to go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just going to say the same, I worked at Wayne State as a community health worker on a chronic disease for a number of years, and then at the health department on chronic disease. And it's the same. I can't get people's time to talk about cardiovascular disease or diabetes. There's, they're trying to think about paying the bill for the house or the utilities or get food on the table, or there's so many other issues that, voting is not up there.
I still believe that two things. One, emergency management stole people's voting power, and it's hard to give people back a sense of power and civic pride. Two, we don't have candidates running on the needs and issues of people in this community. How many people went up there and said, we don't want ShotSpotter? Okay. Went to a forum, said we don't want it, and we're still talking about spending $7 million on ShotSpotter. Well, if we don't find it there, we'll find it somewhere else.
We're still talking about it. Alex, I believe, just because I'm a nerd, and I'm sure Donna believes this too, that maps are essential to democracy, the democratization of data and information. From your vantage point, because you're constantly looking at this stuff, what is the state of democracy in our city?
Yeah, not good.
I think say more.
I think the voter turnout really is just one example. I mean, we have all of these areas of the city where we really lack the kind of community organizations, the kind of even investment from the city or from nonprofits like down in throwaway people. We have these throwaway neighborhoods that are just not getting any focus whatsoever. Even though every neighborhood is supposed to have a future.
That was a good slogan, wasn't it?
It's great marketing.
We know who came up with that. We know the person who coined that.
And it's great for marketing when you want to, sell all of your vacant land so you can have a bigger tax base. But the long and short of it is we still have these neighborhoods that are throwaway, and there's so much not happening all across the city that. It's just too easy to pick out these pockets all the time and say, oh, we know this, we know what's happening here, we know the name of this neighborhood, but we don't know everything else.
One of the things you worked on is a project with Jackson Copel on outlining the energy grid. Can you talk about that and your findings?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were specifically looking at DTE Energy and their kind of grid capacity, grid infrastructure upgrades, because they're in this rate case right now asking the Michigan Public Service Commission for basically a 9% increase, even though they've already increased rates since 2015 and gotten $477 million from ratepayers. And so we looked at, are they serving everyone in the same way with the same, everyone's paying for the same rate. Are they getting the same level of service? And they're not. Detroiters who are in predominantly black and brown communities are being served by outdated and ancient and dangerous, maybe not ancient, but outdated and dangerous infrastructure where places like Greater Downtown, which, who knows what that is, but it's become its own kind of spatial marker in the city. But Greater Downtown, it's all upgraded. You can easily add electronic vehicle charging stations because the grid can handle it. It can't handle it in the neighborhoods of Detroit. And there is no plan that we've seen that they're going to upgrade these communities again who've been disinvested in for decades. And
that was really shocking to me when the most recent infrastructure bill passed, and some people came to the city. I think Rashida Tlaib brought somebody from, oh my goodness, I don't even remember where she was from, so I'm embarrassed.
The EPA?
The EPA, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I got your back.
EPA, thank you. My back needs having today.
No, I got you.
But she brought somebody from the EPA, and they were talking about the fact that these funds were supposed to be deployed in the most vulnerable communities. And, the entire city of Detroit is considered most vulnerable. And what ends up happening is the most socially vulnerable people and neighborhoods in the city of Detroit almost never get prioritized by the mayor or by council or by the state. And so I didn't know anything about these grid issues until Jackson came and talked to a group of us in Detroit 21. And I was kind of blown away because here we are pushing solar and electric vehicles and not understanding that if we actually did the things that we are trying to get people to do, our grid would not be able to sustain these changes.
Right. Yeah.
And that means that, and I'm sure it's not just Detroit, that our federal government, state governments, and city governments have got to prioritize investing in neighborhood grids if they're really going to see the turnabout. Because the people who are living in these communities where their grids are updated, they already have solar. A lot of them, that's where you see most of the solar. The change is going to come about when it's coming to the neighborhoods. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. About solar?
Yeah, I mean about the change. I mean, we'll get more people with solar, more people with electric vehicles, but right now what we're seeing is where you live helps determine whether or not you already have solar or electric vehicles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the grid is not equal.
And Jenna Brooker at Bridge Detroit and Nina over at Planet Detroit, we are continuing to report on that. So shameless plug, check out our coverage at Bridge Detroit. We are talking about it. And actually the latest story right now is that the Michigan Public Service Commission on last Wednesday issued an order for its staff to conduct an audit around...
to get a third-party audit.
And a third-party audit that the utilities are going to pay for. DTE and consumers are going to pay for this to really look at... number one, outages, their systems, and whether or not they're working, and if they've been in accordance to state law. So this is going to be interesting. The story is still being written on there. Alex, what you got coming up before we have to go? Because we got to go. We're over time.
Oh man, more maps always.
More maps.
Detroitography.com.
Will you come back and see us?
Oh, for sure.
We absolutely love this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to talk about maps? I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what? And you need to come to the east side. We would love to work with you on some of this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you do contract work? All right, y'all
Yeah.
hit up Alex. What's your personal website?
AlexBhill.org.
All right, alexbhill.org. Thank you for coming on. Listen, if you have topics that you want to discuss on Authentically Detroit, hit us up on our socials at Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. It is time for shout outs. Donna, let's start with you. You got any shout outs?
Yes, I want to shout out Bethany Howard, who is one of our young managers. She was in the Free Press this weekend. It was really cool. She's been working
The Sunday paper.
The Sunday paper. She's been working on a Rain Ready Homes project where we're assessing the plumbing and assessing and helping to design plumbing solutions through backflow preventer valves as well as green infrastructure in homes inside of flood zones. And she's got 6 done. 6 backflow preventer valves and 5 rain gardens. She was highlighted because of her great leadership, and I'm just really proud of her. I made a very corny joke because apparently she grew up in Orlando's family's church, New Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church, and I said she's our New Rising Star. But also,
This is true.
shout out to Gwen Winston and Lottie Spady. We had a staff retreat on Friday, and shout out to all of the staff who participated. I'm telling you, if you're looking for people to build power in your staff and build teamwork, Gwen and Lottie are amazing. I knew it before the retreat, but we all walked away feeling like we could, cure all the problems in the world. It's great to have people help lift you into this work because it's so easy to get burned out.
Yeah. Alex, do you have any shout outs?
I'm going to shout out We the People Michigan, which is where I work. They're doing some incredible work both around pushing against ShotSpotter and this kind of focus on police as the solution and alternative. And then also, really pushing this equity issue, utility redlining, looking at DT and consumers.
All right. I would like to shout out our Olivia Lewis at Bridge Detroit and Aaron Einhorn. I don't know if you guys remember this, but in July of 2021, Bridge Detroit worked with NBC to co-publish an article and series on the Burwood Wall. We called it the Wailing Wall. And we brought so much light and attention to that story over there. And today, Jamon Jordan and other folks from the city and neighbors around the Burwood Wall erected their historical marker for that landmark over there. And I want this to be an illustration around the power of narrative. We told that story, and I know that the telling of that story, right, and the sourcing of those residents who lived through that was a great push toward getting this historical marker over there. So shout out to journalists who and we worked for months on that story, for telling the stories, and we're able to see some of the needle being moved. And Jamon Jordan, amazing speech today. We covered it. So I'm really happy that those folks over there and that history is being acknowledged and named and mapped.
Absolutely.
Because it's so important. All right, y'all. That's going to do it for this episode of Authentically Detroit. We will see you next time. Until then, we want you to catch the wave.